paper and all the security stops that they have at tech support.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the last 4 digits of the credit card you opened the account with?
In 2003.
Oh, in 2003?
There's the opening.
Probably expired or canceled by now.
That company's been hacked 5 times. They sent me 5 new cards. Look at this. Is the audio up?
Are microphones live?
I don't know.
I guess one way is you could start swearing, then we'll find out.
I'm not going to do that yet. Okay, listen. Master Control is setting up a clip that I did in the studio this morning that we're going to incorporate it into the summary judgment opening.
Welcome to the Summary Judgment Talk Show, by the way.
Welcome to the Summary Judgment Talk Show. Today is July 29th. We do a show from the American News Media Center in the very small town of Harwinton, Connecticut. But there is a video clip that's going to play.
Right now?
Right now.
All right.
And then we're going to talk about Sky's exciting week.
And we're going to keep our mouths shut during the...
Need the sound up?
Nope. Okay, we're back. So let's start it again. This is summary judgment, Saturday, July 29th, 2017. To my right and to your left is Dan Lynch, who's normally in master control. He's got some issues that he's going to, there's going to come a time he's going to open up and he's going to sit on the black wall in the hot seat and he's going to go off on some of the things that have happened in his life. To my right in the middle is Matt Tyszkka, retired Lieutenant Colonel, Connecticut State Police. He's a really non-practicing attorney.
That's correct.
He is a member of Oath Keepers, Connecticut Carries, Citizens Defense League, and he's a very ardent supporter of the Constitution, as we all are at the table. My name is Ed Peruta. I am formerly the lead plaintiff in Peruta v. San Diego / California that the Supreme Court turned down and gave me the opportunity to have Justice Thomas write about my case in very moving words. Attorney Rachel Baird is not here today. She is out tending to a client matter where she could not leave.
You know, I just thought of something, Ed, when you said that Matt was a, how did you phrase it? He was a non-practicing attorney.
That's
Right.
correct.
So you're a non-practicing attorney, and I'm a practicing non-attorney.
That's correct. You're professional pro se.
You're a professional pro se.
That's how we can call you.
But I'd like to start off. Matt's got a lot of issues. He always comes with a lot of issues. We just never give him enough time to talk. But this past week, Monday through Friday, Sky Montario, a almost 14-year-old Torrington, Connecticut student, attended a video workshop class at Housatonic Regional High School in Falls Village, Connecticut. And last night, we had an opportunity to go up and look at and view the 10-minute plus documentary video
Finished product.
that they put together. It was excellent. It was very well done. It was extremely informative. And I think that it may have lit a fire in Sky Montario as far as her realizing that she's been here and she was able to go someplace else. She fit in. She appeared to be comfortable with that group. And I'd like to congratulate Sky on her participation in what I consider a great video clip.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very diverse group. They came from, I guess when I dropped her off, I think the first day, I thought, oh, we're all going to be, local. But they were from all different parts of Connecticut, what was it?
Southington,
I think it was 3 girls, 4 boys, I think, if I remember.
Yeah.
A couple of instructors. And I think that it's important to also point out that it's not like they started with footage all done. I mean, there was a topic selected for them. They had to conduct interviews. They had to write scripts. They had to do, editing.
Yeah.
They had to go on site to do they had to do the interviews. And I guess some of them had been somewhat lined up ahead of time. But I sat there and watched that thing and thought to myself, they did this in a week. It didn't matter to me that there were, and it wasn't also like they did, a week's worth of all-nighters like some of us have done in the professional world. They got dropped off at 10 in the
10 to
morning.
4.
And they got picked up at 4, and then they started the next
And
day.
ate lunch sometime in between.
Yep. So, I mean, very impressive.
Not good for them.
It
It sounds exciting. And I don't think we have the clip, right?
No, we do not.
Okay. Yeah. Someday we'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did ask the question. I go, hopefully they'll publish it, this coming week. As a matter of fact, I'll take the action of following up with the folks who instructed the class. Because, there was a fair number of questions after it was over. They opened up the floor to questions. And
But let's talk about the topic.
yeah.
It is a local, it is a focus on a local issue. In the Northwest Hills of Connecticut, it is extremely rural. There's really no big metropolitan areas to speak of.
I mean, how many people that I see this week walking right by the front door of that building who are on their several 100-mile walk of the Appalachian Trail? I give you an idea of how
Right.
rural it is.
And when I drove Sky up there, she said, "Ed, can you stop at a convenience store so I can get some gum?" I said, "Sure." And I drove past a convenience store, and she looked at me like I had 2 heads. And in my head, I'm going, well, how hard is it going to be to find a convenience store?
That was the last one for 30 miles.
That was the last one for 30 miles. And when we got to where we were going, I said, well, there ought to be one right down here in Falls Village. Well, Falls Village, you can throw a baseball from one end of town to the other. So, no, not here. So we had to drive up Route 7 to find a gas station that sold gum. So that, so it was, it's very rural.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. Very
And-
rural.
The Sharon Valley is great.
Yeah.
And this is the issue. Small communities have got their own, in Connecticut, there's 169 named communities. And they all have their own, and I'm going to use the term because this is how they describe it, self-rule. We do not have county government in Connecticut. Each town wanted to be separate and control their own destiny, control their own fire, control their own police, control their own education, and, stay out of our business and let us live the way we want to live. And most communities have a grammar school, a middle school or junior high school, and the high school. The three levels that I'm accustomed to seeing. Grammar used to be junior, and then they came up with this middle, and then high school. When I heard one of those students in the clip say that there are only 2 students in the 8th grade class in Cornwall, Connecticut. 2.
Wow.
Well, does that mean they have 1 teacher for 2 students? Or do they, because it's middle school, 8th grade, or junior high school, the 2 students go from class to class, go around. But that's a problem. Now, they talked about consolidation. Consolidating the schools in Cornwall with the schools in Falls Village. And said that could be a solution. Somebody in the audience, and it had a pretty good turnout for something as small
Was
as
this
this.
like a public hearing or public
No,
meeting?
it was the parents and the friends and the people who knew that this was good. It was probably
Okay.
20, 30 people maximum in the audience.
Okay.
It's a shame. It's a shame, that the state representative and state senator that cover that area hadn't been contacted ahead of time and invited to
Well,
view
that
this
would have been
for,
very
for a number
useful.
for a number.
I'm
of
not going to
reasons,
get involved in what they should have done, because
Yeah.
they should have done that.
Yeah.
To show the capability of teenagers to produce something that is thought-provoking. But there was somebody, and I guess there were 2 other towns in Connecticut in the past who talked about consolidation. And in order to consolidate, you have to have a vote in this town to do it, positive, and a vote in the other town to do it, positive. And both towns rejected it flat out.
In this case
The
here?
prior.
Up
In
in
the
Right.
prior.
It could have been Canaan and
in the
Norfolk.
prior situation.
Oh, in
Canaan,
Pryor,
Canaan,
okay.
town of Canaan and Norfolk. North Canaan, Norfolk. Whatever. And this documentary was almost designed, made to go to the legislature's education committee or to the state legislature and say, this is the problem that we have. Well, to look for state funding. Well, based on everything that I'm aware of sitting here today on July 29th, 2017, there ain't no fucking money in the state of Connecticut's treasury to fund additional money to any local public school system, in addition to what they're probably already getting. But we've got a governor that's talking about cutting funds to affluent communities and giving the funds that they take away to the inner city poorer schools. Now, that is what lights my fire. That is what concerns me. And I know, and let me set it up. Connecticut, back in the 1970s, had a federal lawsuit called Horton v. Meskel. Now, everybody today is talking about Chef v. O'Neill. But prior to Chef v. O'Neill, and you can look this up on the internet, these cases, Horton v. Meskel preceded Chef v. O'Neill, and this was the issue that Mr. Horton brought to the court. I believe he lived in the town of Canton, Connecticut. And the town of Canton wanted to hire teachers to work in Canton, Connecticut. And what does any town do? They try to get the cream of the crop, the best students graduating from the teaching colleges. So they would solicit a graduate to come work in their town. Well, the graduate would say, how much are you paying? And back then, I'm just going to use a number, we're paying $20,000 a year. But a town like West Hartford, who had a very big tax base, was offering $30,000 a year. So the cream of the crop followed the money to the towns that paid the best starting salary.
Right. And you can't blame anybody in that equation.
Can't blame anybody for that.
It's free market.
Can't blame anybody for that. And Mr. Horton sued, saying that the education system in Connecticut, the funding mechanism for education in the state of Connecticut, was unconstitutional because, and I want to say he said property tax was the unconstitutional mechanism to fund education, because there's towns that had more of a tax base than the smaller towns, so the smaller towns were at a disadvantage.
Sorry.
That's okay. $25 fine for having your phone ring. So that was the beginning of the challenges in Connecticut that education faced with financial issues. Now, Chef v. O'Neill was another lawsuit coming out of the city of Hartford saying that, you know, our towns don't get enough money to properly fund education, and, you know, it's taken on a life of its own. So and in Connecticut, acquiring an education is a constitutional right. Being educated by government is you have a constitutional right to be educated, and a quality education, I guess. I haven't really paid a lot of attention to it. But when you look at small towns, and I'm going to use the towns that surround where I live as an example. Wethersfield, just south of Hartford. Rocky Hill, just south of Wethersfield. Newington, Berlin, and Cromwell. They each have a superintendent of schools. Oh, going rate's about $200,000 for a superintendent. They each have a police chief. They each have a fire chief. They each have their own dispatch center for public safety. They each have their own record-keeping system for public safety. They each have to have an aerial ladder truck in their equipment base. They each have to have a rescue truck one or more rescue trucks in their public safety fleet. I guess they each have to have a SWAT vehicle. When in fact, if they were all included into one department, I have never in 68 years, and I'll give you this, 50 years from my age of 18 forward, I have never known of two working structure fires in adjoining towns, each one requiring an aerial ladder or a tower operation to put the fire out.
Simultaneously.
at the same time. So if each town was considered a battalion and you had, say, Hartford County Dispatch would say, and each town in Connecticut has a tax number associated with it. For example, the town of Wethersfield is 159, and the town of Rocky Hill is 119, and I believe Newington may be 67. It's got 94, 67. So they go like this. Working structure fire in Battalion 159, you have a working structure fire at the Great Meadow Towers on such and such a street. Battalion 119, start moving your tower ladder to the fire scene in 159. Number 64, start moving your pumpers and your tankers and whatever. And now we have what's called task force. But let's not get off the topic. Because we have local home rule, because the politicians created the scenario where I live in, and there was a woman after the viewing last night. Well, we are Falls Village. We are part of Canaan, but we identify as Falls Village. Canaan is North Canaan, but we are Falls Village. It is that attitude that we are Falls Village. We want our own schools. We want our own teachers. We want our own superintendent. We want our own Board of Education so that we can go and talk to them and they know who we are and we know who they are. And if we're politically connected, we can get what we want. That is local home rule. And that is so prevalent in Connecticut. But here's the one thing you have to fight, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan because I'm sure Dan has some comments. This is the problem. This is the issue. Home rule. Making your rules in this town and no accountability to a county government. You know, no saying, okay, let's work together. It's crazy. And it's going to come back to bite us in the ass because we do not have the money to support local home rule. We don't have it. It's not there. And as long as our political system in Connecticut, and I'm sure it's in other areas of the country, as long as a slime ball like Governor Daniel Malloy can get into office based on the votes that come out of the inner city, he's going to rob the towns that didn't vote for him and give the money to the towns that did. That is what's happening in Connecticut.
You mean the sanctuary cities?
The sanctuary cities.
So, I mean, there are so many variables that feed into this concept that, you know, was covered in this video. You look at, there's been obviously a generational change, right? This is not something that just happened because of the current General Assembly who was voted in or something. So we have to remind ourselves or our viewers of a few things. Number one, today's July 29th, the state of Connecticut currently has no budget. So we're being ruled by executive order by the governor. But you have to roll back and kind of look at, okay, what are some of the issues that are impacting these towns that led to the issue? Okay, you have families are not having 4 and 5 kids anymore. Right? I'm sure there are families.
No, they're not.
I'm saying, when I say families, I'm talking statistically, overall, on average, you're not seeing family sizes with, 4 and 5 children. So, you might see 1.5, 2 kids. Obviously, you're going to see one or 2 kids in a family. That's partly where this starts. All right. So you look at that, absolutely beautiful. I mean, ironically, you started off, this whole talk about driving up there and stopping for a pack of gum. Well, the young people who are living in that area who have to maybe travel 20 minutes to a little convenience store to get a pack of gum. Well, the lure of going to Boston, going to New York, going to maybe Hartford or, who knows, any of the cities, any of the places where there's kind of more happening is pretty great. After they go to school, a lot of these folks look and say, well, I can't work. Where am I going to work within a reasonable commute to, and I'll say Canaan or North Canaan, Falls Village. And I'm not picking on those towns, but I'm just saying, if that's where you live and you draw a 30, 40-minute circle around there, say, where could I work?
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Northeastern Connecticut has the same situation.
There are plenty of places in New England
That have the
and
same
New York,
situation.
that we're. I mean, we're talking about that portion of Connecticut is within a stone's throw of Massachusetts and New York. I've done a lot of cycling up that way. I mean, it's beautiful cycling, up and down the hills and stuff. And one of the reasons it's great is because there's not a whole lot of traffic on the roads. It's beautiful. It's unspoiled. But the reality is that also, unfortunately, partly feeds into the problem that they're now addressing, because they look at the families that are there, and the kids will get a good education locally. I think in the documentary that they showed, I think that one of the people interviewed said something to the effect of just, he was from that area, and then when he went to school, there were 200 kids in his class.
No, 200 kids in the school, I think.
Or in the school.
In the school.
And here it is one generation later, and there were
80,
30. A much, much, much smaller number. And so he's looking at this now, but now you also have to start to take in the other pieces of the equation, where you look at the state budget, you look at the fact that our governor, back in, I think it was February 4th or somewhere around there, had proposed that the towns, that the 169, municipalities, now start to absorb the teachers' pensions, which up until that point had been. So you have all these issues. And by the way, the fact that the state doesn't have a budget, you've got 169 municipalities who, some of whom have been doing a very good job kind of managing their own finances. Now they've got this enormous wild card out there because they don't know what reimbursements they're getting for education. They don't know exactly what's happening with teachers' pensions. They don't know what's happening with things like the resident trooper program. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the financial impact to some of these communities, based on a statewide crisis, I'm going to call a spending crisis. It's not a revenue crisis. It was a poor, mismanaged funding or spending crisis for I'm going to say decades, really. So, it'll be interesting to see. There's different ways that they could kind of try to skin this, but the reality is you're not going to suddenly change. You're not going to suddenly overnight be able to attract family. Hey, look at this! All the new families that are going to be moving into town. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to work? They're going to have 4 or 5 kids, and
Hartford will go bankrupt.
It's inevitable.
You cannot get that rat out of the house.
Well, I would say that will go bankrupt. I'd say they are bankrupt. They will seek bankruptcy protection. They will officially declare.
They will officially look for a court to agree
to grant them bankruptcy protection.
Now, because let me give you an example. Rachel and I were driving, or somehow, some way, yesterday we were someplace and we were looking, and there were all of these new homes. And the sign said, and I want to say they were condominiums, 55 and over. Well, when a town approves a development for 55 and over, what they're saying is this will have no impact on our schools.
On the school system, right.
Because in the town of Rocky Hill, they're under the guise of preserving farms. They don't want that farmer to sell his 100 acres to a developer who's going to build the houses, who are going to be occupied by young families, who are going to have kids, who are going to go to West Hill School, and I use West Hill School as the example in Rock Hill. West Hill is at capacity now. If they have young families moving into Rocky Hill, and they live in the district for West Hill School, the town is faced with building a new school or adding on to an existing school, okay? And one only has to look at Wethersfield High School to see how it grew and expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded. And then what happens? In Wethersfield, and I remember probably 8 years ago. Now I grew up in Wethersfield. I knew almost every name of every house on the major streets, the families. I was a Wethersfield policeman. I'm observant. I see things. And I drove, there's two main roads, residential roads that go through Wethersfield north to south. There's Wolcott Hill Road and there's Ridge Road, the money streets. And I can remember driving when we were doing public access in Wethersfield, Wolcott Hill Road. I counted 12 fucking real estate signs on Wolcott Hill Road. People selling their homes. I came home on Ridge Road. I got another 12 signs up there. Now, I have a very dear friend named Don Putnam. Don Putnam's mother, I think, was the chairman of the Board of Education. Now, he's older than me by probably 20 years. So his mother is older than my mother. And it was prestigious to be the chairman of the Board of Education in Wethersfield.
I'm sure it still is.
It still is.
Anywhere.
It still is. It still is. And there was a time that businesses wanted to move into Wethersfield. And Wethersfield said, oh no. We are the bedroom community for the insurance capital of the world. All of the suits come home to Wethersfield at night. They ride the bus home. You know, our kids work in the insurance industry. They get off the bus, they come home. They drive into Hartford, they go to work, they come home. Well, insurance started to leave Hartford. And the kids started to leave the houses. And I remember Donald Putnam sold his house.
Well, I happen to not really be familiar with the town. So there's really no commercial base to speak of that are contributing to the tax rolls?
They did not want business coming into town. They wanted to be a residential community.
Right, and so while
Now
that may maintain the
base,
character of the town,
everything is on the back
right.
of the homeowner now.
Yep.
There is no large taxpayer, so to speak, in the town of Wethersfield. They don't have a Buckland Hills Mall. They don't have an Aetna or a Cigna, paying taxes.
Yeah.
They don't have a GE or a Sikorsky. They don't have one of those. And Don Putnam saw his taxes going to a place that he never envisioned, saying, I'm paying more now in taxes than I've ever paid for my mortgage, principal, interest,
Right.
and taxes.
Right, even though the house is paid off,
And I'm on a fixed income. And I'm on a fixed income. I don't have an opportunity to go out and generate some extra money to pay the extra obligation. Had to sell his house. Now, granted, he was living alone. He lost his wife, but he was living alone in this huge house. But that was his family house. Gone.
And here's the irony of that situation. So he was a elderly guy, probably, right? If
He
you
was
say
in
he's
his
older than
80s.
you, right? And he's an elderly guy living in the house alone. Okay, so the irony now is he's forced to sell. So, and who in all likelihood is going to buy? A younger family with kids who put a burden on the school system, and the cycle continues.
And the taxes will go
Well,
up.
if you When I was younger, everybody was building apartments. That condominiums were non-existent.
All right.
People built apartments. Companies built apartments. Then they had a rental office, and they rented out the apartments, and they collected rents every month. And then somebody came up with the great idea, why don't we convert these things to condominiums, and instead of getting $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year gross, we'll sell it for $120,000. We'll get 10 years worth of rental income, okay, and still get condo fees.
Yeah, common fees, yeah.
And we'll still get common fees. So they had a lot of conversions from apartments to condos. And there was a period of time when there wasn't a goddamn apartment to be found. You were renting a condo, or you were living in what I would consider a non-desirable apartment complex that couldn't be converted. But what do I see going up now? Apartments. They're back to apartments. You know, there's not a lot of condominiums going up. And I know what it is. They built senior 55 and over condominiums in Newington, in back of the Grantmore. There used to be a driving range.
Oh, that's right.
And it's
yeah.
all full of these monster
Right.
duplex condominiums now, 55 and over. 55 and over. The town loves you when you come in and say 55 and over. The town is, under the guise of preserving open space and saving farmland, in the town of Rock Hill, they had a $10 million bond issue that gave the town the discretion to spend up to $10 million. They don't have to go get approval or a referendum, it's there. The Hayes family, they bought the commercial rights to the property, let them keep the farm, but they can't build any subdivisions on it. In perpetuity, the town said, nope, that's never going to go to a developer. Now they have a guy, is referred to as Tony Tomato, and he probably has a couple hundred acres. And the town has been busting his ass over the barns, breaking down. You got a lot of junk vehicles. It doesn't look nice. Get rid of it. And I said, Tony, put a fucking for sale sign in front of the house. All developers welcome. Low-income housing
Section
approved.
8, yeah.
Section 8 approved.
You get some
It'll
attention.
do it.
Because that's what Lucas did out in California. He wanted to build a studio, and his neighbors didn't want him to. So he said, fine. So he went low-income housing. Now, all I'm saying is, let's go back to Falls Village and Cornwall and a documentary that was done by kids. It appeared that all 7 of the kids who answered questions actually had their thought process ignited when they were doing the interviews and listening to the topic and realizing there's an issue. The kids.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, the reality is, if you take that 10 and a half minutes worth of content, and had it not been for the fact that we knew Sky and we saw and we knew about it and stuff, if that thing got distributed and pushed out in multiple fashions, people wouldn't know. It wouldn't matter, first of all, whether it was a group of kids or a group of seniors or a group of film professionals. It wouldn't matter. It's well done. It presents a very current, very important topic out there.
It
and
is
that's
thought-provoking.
Yeah, and that's what really...
It is thought-provoking. Because and I'll give you a situation. I had an issue with my son in the public schools. I went bullshit. They put my son at home to be schooled at home. They hired a teacher who came to my house to teach my son because of what I was doing in the schools, because what I was going after in the schools. And when they came, they said, her name was Bitsy Skelly. She's now a principal in the Rocky Hill school system. Wonderful woman. Came to the house and she goes, well, I'm only going to be here 10 hours a week. What do you mean? Well, you're only required to teach 5 subjects. And there's only 2 hours per subject per week required. Follow me? So I said, really? So you're going to come in and teach 5 subjects 2 hours a week. Yep. It's the only time my son ever made the honor roll. Bitsy Kelly came in. She went down into the finished basement with my son. She had a desk looking at his desk. They had a grease board for like a blackboard. She gave him his lessons. I knew every day she came up out of the basement whether he did his homework. I knew every day that he was paying attention to the teacher. We literally had a situation where it was 1-on-1.
Yeah.
And they were paying her a very small amount of money. It wasn't a lot of money. But he made the honor roll, and I went like this. We ought to just give every student their own teacher under these terms. You only have to learn 5 subjects, and you only have to have 10 hours a week of instruction. And, she could do 3 students a day, you know.
No brick and mortar expenses.
No brick and mortar, just send the teacher to the house and teach them right in the house.
Well, I mean, then you lose out on all the other.
Oh, what do you lose out on, Dan?
The whole socialization. Yes, absolutely.
You're not going to be grab assing in gym. You're not going to be throwing shit around during lunch period. You're not going to be sent to the office during homeroom or study halls. You need all of that shit to round you out.
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah?
You need some of it.
No. You need the kid to go in there and fucking learn. And if the teacher ain't teaching them, the teacher's got to go. The teacher's got to go.
Oh, it's the Board of Ed calling.
Oh,
no.
Jesus. You are not supposed to be watching this show.
Well, I saw Dan Lynch sitting there taking my place, doing a great job, so I wanted to call in and say hi.
Well, we told everybody that you're doing, what do you call it?
On assignment.
Attorney work. You're on assignment.
She's undercover.
Well, even attorneys need a break when they're on assignment, so I'm taking a break.
Well, I knew we were going to get our ass chewed sometime during these 2 hours, so I guess this is it.
Hey, Matt, pipe down a little bit. Getting a little aggressive there now.
I mean, here's my most important question of the day, though. Within the first couple minutes of the show, when Paul Reese realized that Rachel isn't on, is he still watching?
Well, we're trying to perfect Skype, so you never know.
So I guess we'll find out, because that'll be the next phone call.
We'll get a message or something, or a phone call. Right. So,
I did want to call in and say, and I know you've been discussing it, that we just saw a wonderful video yesterday, and it was so impressive, and I just wanted to congratulate Sky and all the kids at the program up in Falls Village, Connecticut. They should have a lot more programs like that encourage kids not only to become aware of issues, social issues, but also to learn how to be journalists, how to be videographers, and how to get out there and meet people and interview them. So it was just a wonderful night.
yeah, there's nothing like hands-on experience, when you have an interest like that where you can actually go out and put what you learn into practice, and, essentially that's the best way most people learn. Just go hands-on.
Yeah.
I mean, Rachel, we're 43 minutes into the show. This has been the only topic we've covered so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that our state representatives, our state senators, whoever, first selectmen, would be very interested to see that video. So that's what I wanted to say, and I got to get back to work.
All right. Well, I'm glad you called in. We miss you over here, and I take it you'll be back next week?
I will be back next week. See you guys later.
All right.
Make sure you bring the dogs.
Bye.
Okay,
All right,
bye-bye.
see ya. I guess the show's going to be going to the dogs, huh?
Show's going to the dogs.
So anyway, so I think we've exhausted that topic anyway, and probably maybe we move on to see what some of
I
these.
figured she was going to tie me to the whipping post.
Let's see what some of
She
these.
might.
Let's see what some of these gems are that Matt's brought with him. Let's not go down the whipping post thing yet.
Oh, yeah, the whipping post. Yeah, wait till you hear this one.
We're gonna save that.
Yeah.
So what do you got hiding there, Matt?
Not much, just some things. I know in the past week or two we've had some issues where things have to come to a head with the Supreme Court on firearms issues. They have
U.S. Supreme Court.
U.S. Supreme
Right.
Court. They've got to do it, and like Ed said before, when the Supreme Court rejected hearing Peruta versus California, Justice Thomas, joined by Neil Gorsuch, did a very nice and very strong dissent on that, which is rarely done in cert cases. And they want to hear gun cases and put some of these things to bed because they haven't heard any gun cases in about 7 or 8 years. There's another one out of Appeals Court for the Second Circuit which for the Second Circuit was pretty good. There were guns confiscated from Nassau County woman in 2012. The case was Panzella versus Nassau County. And the federal court ruled that Nassau County Sheriff's Department had an illegal gun retention policy. And boiled down, their policy was that once we confiscate guns, for whatever reason, you just don't get them back. We have ultimate discretion and not give them back, but they're saying that the law only empowers them to confiscate, it doesn't empower them to give back. Yet her husband, who was under the same restraining order as her, that's how it started, a restraining order, they gave him his gun back right in the parking lot of the police department. One of his friends, he was an ex-cop, I guess, one of his friends comes out and hands him the gun, and away he goes. But she can't get her guns back. So I don't know what they're going to do now because the Second Circuit ruled that they can't do that. So I guess they're going to have to see if the county is going to appeal that further or if they're going to revise their policy and start giving people's guns back when these orders expire, like you're supposed to do. There have been similar cases not only in New York but in Massachusetts as well. And I know Ed and Rachel have fought cases here to get guns back from police departments that were confiscated either under protective order or restraining order, or, for whatever reason. It just seems like, once a police department gets your guns, that's it. They have control and they can decide whether you need them or not.
Is there an obligation on the part of the law enforcement, whether it's local or state, when a firearm and or related equipment are, ammunition, etc., when they are confiscated and held, are there requirements in place that they be protected, preserved from damage, from going missing, from, anything altering the, it's property, right? So if it were a phone.
Well, let me.
So I just don't know.
Let me give you a couple.
I'm asking because I don't know.
Let me give you a couple examples. Dwayne Dutel. I can say his name because it's a very publicized issue in Norwalk. They confiscated firearms from Dwayne Dutel. And when they gave him back his shotgun, which when they took it was in its case. And, sometimes the case that you buy it in, together with the gun, increase the value because it's like if you get an antique car and it's got a VIN number that matches the engine number, this engine belongs to this car.
Right.
Okay? Well, they gave him all the shit back. But they gave him his gun with somebody else's rifle case. He went, bullshit. Where's my rifle case? This isn't my rifle case. Where's my rifle case?
Right.
Well, they didn't keep track of it. Well, they had to find it, and they eventually resolved it, but that's the issue you're talking about now.
Yeah, but the issue. So in other words, again, not I don't know the gun, but so if there's they confiscate a rifle, and it comes back without the sights on it, or without
they take a black
rust on it.
Let's say they take a black powder, antique style firearm, and they put it in its mint. It's like a coin. Uncirculated
right.
coin is worth more than a coin that's been out in circulation for a year. It has more value. And they seize his firearm, and when it's resolved, they give it back to him. Well, when it comes back, the wood stock is chipped, the barrel is rusted. There's nobody in there maintaining the quality of the firearm during the period that it's being stored in a damp room.
And I guess that's the question: is there an obligation?
Well, I think there is.
Yeah, that's
I
been
think
fought
there is.
by people before, and the same things happen with cars when cars are seized. Either seized, because they were used in a crime, because they were stolen, being held as evidence, or whatever. The departments, of course, nobody has a garage to store cars, so they leave them outside, sometime on grass. And by the time the cases are resolved and the insurance companies figure out what's going on.
You got weeds growing through.
Oh, yeah, and they're rusted, the frames are rusted.
The frames are rusted out from the grass and the moisture from
Mice
underneath.
get in there. It's a big mess. It's a big mess. And, yeah, I know we've had the problem in the legislature in the past where people have made that complaint.
Summary judgment.
Hey,
Turn
want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
turn the volume down on whatever you're watching.
All we're getting is background noise.
Okay, go
That's
ahead.
better.
You still there, caller?
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Is this the end of the world?
What do you say?
I don't know. We're going to give you. Never mind.
The question.
Call
that
back
that
with a
that
clearer
he asked
call.
twice is you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world was the phrase that was made twice.
Oh.
So, I think the last time we had a call like that was April Fool's Day.
Oh.
So-
Well, yeah.
A little late.
When government seizes it, if you're going to take my heroin and you're going to present it in court, it better be the same goddamn heroin you seized and not a degraded heroin or something different.
yeah.
It's got to be the same.
So let's get back to the gun case that Matt was talking about.
Yep.
And I'll let you finish that because then I had another follow up. So I think I got you off track because
Yeah,
I was asking about.
I think it's pretty much done is the fact that a woman sued in the Second Circuit, which is usually anti-gun. They came and said, no, when things, you can't hold the property indefinitely just because you say so or you want to. There's no law saying that when the order expires, you get your guns back, which I guess generally happens in Connecticut. They do give the guns back. I mean, there have been some departments that have been pretty bulky in that respect, but that's the way it needs to go. And it's a shame that anybody has to sue to have that actually happen. You're entitled to due process. If the order is over and you're now no longer a prohibited person, then you should get your guns back.
Right.
So, and this could happen whether the cops come and bluff you and they make you give up your guns without a warrant or an order, or whether it's under the court order. Once they have the guns,
Well, let
That's
me give you this one. Ted Topier.
there you go. Oh,
Rachel and I got a call from Ted. The police were at his house. This is after the other incident. The police were at his house with a search and seizure warrant, and were in his house searching for and seizing every electronic communication device. Cell phones, computers, fax machines, you name it, they were taking it out of the house. That was probably 2 years ago. They never arrested him. The state still has his equipment, and they haven't offered to bring it back. Now, the state forensic lab can copy every hard drive, can clone every phone's information, and have it electronically and say, okay, here, you can have your...
Here's the device.
Here's the device back. No, by the time Ted Topier gets his laptop back, that laptop will be an antique.
There'll be no driver to be able to preview. The
Yeah,
software won't work.
Yeah, the software won't. Yeah, it's crazy. Now, government does have some responsibility to preserve and to protect the property that they seize. And I think that some departments try their best to keep it in the condition in which they took it. But guess what? If you don't have a policy and practice in place to check it, to make sure, shit's going to happen.
Well, I was going to say, if you don't have a policy or practice or, specified guidelines, be prepared for the fact that at some point someone will challenge the fact that you don't.
Yeah.
Now,
but then we got the courts who will try to protect the town from liability for anything they do wrong. Because, and I know you could do a whole show on how the courts, in my opinion, are corrupt.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Well, I meant really meaning just one show. No, I want to also get back. I want to get back as we were on the firearm track there for a second, because the case that you brought up, Matt, out of the Second Circuit, I thought you were going to mention. I've heard just some discussion around the office here for the last week or two. Was there also a decision or two out of D.C., out of the either the federal or the appellate?
A 2-to-1, a three judge opinion, 2-to-1, saying that you can't have extenuating circumstances as the minimum requirement to get a pistol permit. Self-defense is good enough.
Was that an appellate decision or a district court decision?
D.C. appellate court. Yeah, Court of Appeals Circuit, D.C. Circuit.
But it was a 3-judge panel. And like mine, 2-to-1. And I'm sure that like mine, somebody's going to ask to go en banc to overturn the 3-judge opinion.
But they'll have to do that within, 20 days or something?
They have a certain amount of time. They have a certain amount of time to do it. But I go like this. We all sit back and say we understand the courts. And if we don't understand the courts, we have some limited understanding of the courts. You sue at this level. You appeal, and then the appellate court sits down and is heard by a panel of judges that is, I guess, economical to the state. You have 3 judges hear it, and then they write an opinion. And that's it. You win, you lose. I never knew there was something called en banc until my case. And they said, oh, it may go en banc. What's en banc? Well, that's when they draw straws and they can have 11 judges hear the case because they want a wider and more diverse field of opinions.
The whole panel, right? Yeah.
A panel,
Pretty
not
much
the
a whole
whole,
circuit.
not the whole court, but a bigger panel to hear the issue to get a better reading of the law. And in my case, the en banc overturned the 3-judge panel. And there's other cases that have gone en banc and been overturned.
Now, when Chase Rogers became the Chief Justice of the state of Connecticut, for our state Supreme Court, she made a decision that the Supreme Court would sit en banc for all cases. Okay, now it didn't used to be that way, but that was a decision she made as the
The full court's going to hear the case.
right, all cases. And so if the Supreme Court in the state of Connecticut is hearing a case,
all the judges
right,
are there.
Right, and
Right.
it used to be a panel of, so I guess the throughput probably was greater in terms of the number of, because if you have a 3-judge panel, the Supreme Court, as opposed to everybody hearing it, but I've always questioned well, there's a lot of things I question. I won't go down that path for now.
Well, but what I'm saying is this, is that, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals came out with a decision favoring Second Amendment rights, and I'm sure that somebody's going to ask for en banc, and the chances are, in an en banc panel, that you'll get a different outcome. But it still gets to go to the Supreme Court, regardless of what happens. It could go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, one side or the other will
One side or the other can take it to the
petition
Supreme
it,
Court.
and who knows? But as you've seen, and what does that mean? That means 18 months to 2 years later, there'll be another process, and
Well,
things could change in that time. You never know.
I think that what Justice Thomas was saying is this. You can't keep avoiding this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
and I look at the judges on the Supreme Court and go like this.
Let's see what this is the same. This looks like to be the caller who.
Go ahead. Summary judgment.
You know, we don't have time for that.
You know something? It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Did you want to hear more of the song?
No.
Okay.
All right. This is the way I
I'm
look
the
at
least
it.
patient person in the group, I guess.
Justice Thomas was concerned enough to write a written dissent. And Gorsuch agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't other people who agreed with Thomas. But it was Gorsuch who put his name out there to agree with Thomas.
But right, and it also, I think, signifies that there was probably some spirited discussion going on week after week,
Yeah,
as
this
it was
was held up for
considered.
like 4
In
times.
conference.
Right, as
In
opposed to,
conference.
I mean, I'd
In
say
conference.
there's about 7,500 petitions
Now,
for writ of certiorari
here's-
submitted.
here's
I'll
what-
bet you the overwhelming majority
Here's
simply
why-
get the word denied.
Here's what I like to put my head
Yeah,
on.
normally.
I like to put my head on the pillow at night and think of this as the reason why my case was not taken. We can't take this case because I know how I will have to rule in reading the Second Amendment. I know I'm going to have to rule in Mr. Peruta's favor, so I would rather not take the case than have to render or vote and let everybody know.
But then have to establish clear case law, which
Yeah.
was
Right.
a shame.
In other
They want to
words,
avoid it.
in other words, I don't want to have to make this decision. I don't want to be a justice who has to vote on this topic. Okay?
Yep.
Because I know what the Second Amendment says, and you can't get away from that goddamn word bear. You can't get away from it. How do you bear your firearm? How do you bear it? Now, Thomas will say, well, walking between the bedroom and the kitchen? That's not the concept that the founding fathers had. Now, maybe they're just trying to give enough time to get a constitutional convention going. Maybe they're trying to, look for some miracle to fall out of the sky. Okay? But I'm telling you,
Well, the question's
that-
not going away.
the question is not going away.
Yeah. If anything, quite the contrary.
And I know that at some point in the future, the Second Amendment is either going to disappear as it currently exists, or there's going to be a Supreme Court decision that is going to vindicate the reasons that I brought my case.
Now, you lost me when you say it's going to disappear. You meaning the questions or the challenges?
The words. The words that make up the Second Amendment.
You think so?
They're going to either have to. Well, no. Well, let me give you an example. Let me give you the example. When I went to the police academy, I was taught that the word "shall," when written in a law, is a command of the legislature. You do not have a choice. You shall do what the law tells you to do.
But that's not how.
And
it's
then,
defined.
and then there was and or. And means you had to have both elements, or means you had to have one or the other. And then I had people, and I lived with that almost my entire adult life. And then I started hearing people say, well, the courts have decided that shall means may.
Correct. Shall is discretionary, it's directory.
Shall
It's not
means may.
not mandatory.
Shall means may.
Right, which is
Well,
bullshit.
that is not the way I was taught to read the law or to enforce the law when the word shall was contained in the statute. I'm sorry, sir. I do not have a choice. It mandates, and it's used all the time in domestic cases when a police officer walks in the house. I can't remember her name, but there was a woman out of Torrington who got cut up by her boyfriend or a husband. And she had called and called and called and called, and they never did anything. Huge lawsuit. From that case forward, Rachel would know the name. Officers, when they walk in, shall make an arrest. Shall take somebody in custody.
Must.
They changed the
Shall.
statute after that case, I think.
Right.
Yeah, they changed
But
the
again,
statute.
because what you're really talking about is you're talking about the word shall, may, must.
Well,
What-
think about
in
this.
terms of
Think
intent.
about this. A felon in possession of a firearm shall serve a minimum mandatory period of time in prison. It's called minimum mandatory. Well, Your Honor, shall means may. You don't have to.
Right.
No, I must. Because it says shall. I must. Because the legislature says I must. Minimum mandatory. No, shall means may.
But I mean, the reason this first hit my radar, and I forget the year, I think it was 2014, maybe 2015, and I happened to be at the Legislative Office building, and there was a hearing set one day, and CTM was going to be covering before the Judiciary Committee. I was never so thankful that I just happened to be there, and I caught wire to wire from from beginning to end. It was the day that they had a single item on their agenda. It was the public hearing for them to hear the challenge by the woman Carla Nash, who was mauled by the chimpanzee.
Oh, the one that had her face off?
And it was seeking permission, and the claims commissioner had denied her request for permission to sue the state and with the absence of sovereign immunity, which is nearly identical to the claim that I was raising in a different context. And the Attorney General Jepsen himself came to argue. In a good portion of that hearing, which is televised on CTN, they spent talking about Connecticut General Statute 1-1, which defines terms. And they talk about the fact that the word shall is not mandatory. It's defined by statute as being discretionary or directory was the phrase that they were using. And my head was spinning, and I thought, how many times, if you look through the practice book, do you, I think in common language, you're reading something and it says, this shall happen, this shall, and this shall. If somebody said to me, you shall, whatever, you shall. To me, it's
You shall operate your car at less than the posted limit.
whatever. And
That's may.
And so it's just, it's very problematic from my standpoint, because when the term shall is there, I mean, what do we do? Do we go back in now with all the statutes and practice book rules and have to revisit them all? And the word, when should the word must now replace the word shall if something has to happen at the same time?
Well, must could mean may, I guess, according to their interpretation.
Very
Well,
problematic.
my question would be, what do the legislators think of this? Because if the legislative intent is that this agency shall do this, okay, their intent is that that agency in these circumstances will actually do what they're saying. So now what words can they use to make a judge say, well, the legislature says that this will happen. If A happens, then B must happen, will happen.
Well, and I have to use the word must now.
I guess it's must, because you're
Until
right. The court said may.
Until some creative jurist on an appellate court panel finds other people to agree with him that there is some other way to interpret the word must.
When Rachel is not available for the show, Dan may appear. Okay, that's one option. Dan shall appear.
That's an option.
Or Dan must appear. Means
What
three-
if Dan doesn't appear?
Means three very different things.
Yeah, what if
But
Dan
Dan,
doesn't appear?
Dan
What
can't
happens?
must appear if Dan's not available. So must can't mean shall. Must has to be, what'd you say, discretionary rather than...
They call it discretionary or directory.
Yeah.
There's another case that was very problematic too. It was an appellate decision. I'm sorry, an appellate opinion from a family court appeal, and I don't think the gentleman would mind at all the mention because it's. But gentleman's name is Hector Morera out of Hartford, and he brought forth a very thoughtful appeal on an issue. Sat patiently waiting for the appellate opinion to come down, which it did, and the opinion spends page after page after page talking about this issue of how to slice the word may and shall, and it's. I mean, I read it and I think to myself, this is just an abomination of the language. It's being used, you know, the phrase that I've seen in briefs and things is the legal gymnastics that go on with words. You shouldn't torture them. You know, they should have their normal meaning.
Well, you can bet with a gun case, if it says shall or must, the gun owner, the citizen, will be held to that strictly. You can bet your life on that.
Yeah.
There will be no discretion or may
Correct.
involved.
Yep.
That's a hypocrisy.
And then I guess if it's the other way around, you know, the law enforcement shall take all reasonable efforts to protect the guns until they're returned to the owner.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
you know.
Well, it was optional. Well, we
That's a little
disposed of
fluid.
them.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the point that you made, I have here some cases where the problem we have is that people who have definite need to have a gun, they can show the need, specifically show the need, are being denied permits. Okay, now Ed's case in California, you know, they say, well, it's a May issue. You have to show good cause. Well, these people, like Fox News' John Stossel in 2013, he showed good cause. He was getting death threats, and there were people actually coming after him. He was denied a permit. Okay, woman in San Francisco had a criminal protective order. Okay, and she had, you know, she demonstrated that she was alone in this position. She was, you know, being stalked. She was going to be attacked. They had 9 months delay from the time she applied for the permit, and nobody knows if she ever got the permit. Okay, so presumably it was denied. Corrections officer in San Francisco, deputy district attorney in California.
Denied a permit.
Yeah, denied a permit when he actually had death threats and attempts by a person that he had convicted. They said, nope, not good enough. New Jersey had several of these, including the famous case of Carol Brown, who she had a protective order out, a violent boyfriend, completely demonstrated. She had waited 60 days since she applied, and she ended up being killed by that very same boyfriend, and no permit was ever issued. Washington, D.C., corrections officers who had been threatened. Manager of a Huntington Station, Suffolk County, New York strip club, who had got into several altercations with the Pagan Outlaw Motorcycle Club, had definite threats and attempts on his life, denied. And Hawaii, finally, they take the cake. They haven't issued a permit since 2006. Okay, so yeah, so the Supreme Court has got to get into this. They have to get into this. There's no way anybody could say that you have a Second Amendment right, but you just can't exercise it. But you still have your rights. There's no way that can happen. So, you know, these cases have gone on, and they're still going on across the country.
Let me say something, and I'm going to go outside and do because I can go out and have my cigarette and drink my coffee and
Nobody's here to break your balls. Is that what you're saying?
Nobody's going to break my balls. Let me just say something. We spend a lot of time on Second Amendment issues. We spend a lot of time on constitutional issues.
Yeah. And First Amendment.
Right.
We spend a lot of time on holding government accountable. I want to let everybody know that there is a person at this table sitting to my far right, the left side of your screen, who I think could sit in a chair on camera, and I'll call it the hot seat. He could sit in the hot seat, Dan, I'm talking about you,
I thought you might be.
and tell
Yep.
and tell horror stories. Documented horror stories about government. Now, it is no secret that you've had issues with judicial, and judicial doesn't always get involved. You know, they're not firearm related issues.
Yeah, I mean, I approach things. I guess you and I have different ways of approaching the issues, and so yeah, I have issues. I kind of I'll use the phrase "stay under the radar." I do what I need to do. It's a shame. I certainly I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot over the last few years watching this show. Learned a lot about Second Amendment issues, which I knew little of. Learned a lot about First Amendment issues, but sadly, at the beginning of the show, we were I was making a little joke about your introduction of Matt as a non-practicing attorney, and I was a practicing non-attorney. Never would I have dreamed about what I've had to live through, but it's
It's your frustration with the courts. I mean, we've talked a lot about it, among all of us, and the courts are just
Listen.
like out of control.
We're not teenagers or newlyweds in our mid-20s doing a show on internet, like I said in that piece that I did, I'm the old fart that sits here, and shakes my head at the difference between when I was younger and the impression I had of government, and now that I'm older and the impression I currently have of government. They are so far apart. My opinions are so far apart regarding government. And I say, does every older person think like this? Am I the only person? Am I outside of the norm thinking like this? And I'll say this. I think that there's young people in this country. They don't give a flying fuck about this country. They just want to be able to go through life, listen to their music, go out and party at night, do whatever they do, and they're not struggling. And they're not participating.
I mean, I look at, many times, both on camera and off, we've had discussions about some of the things that I've experienced, with, I'll say, the courts in general.
Oh!
The courts and the legal system, which includes, of course, attorneys who choose to kind of live outside the rules, but perhaps, either just enough inside the rules or outside the rules, knowing full well that the likelihood that they're really ever going to be held accountable is slim to none because because the mechanisms that are allegedly in place, especially when a challenge is brought forth by a self-represented party, we don't worry about it. But what I feel badly about in this scenario is, I've got two daughters, adult daughters now, 21 and 24. I've got young nephews. I have other friends and things. And 10 years ago, the advice that I would have given them is far different than the advice that I'll give now. I'll give very strong, opinionated advice now of don't, if they find themselves heading into a situation that deals with, courts or attorneys or law enforcement, don't talk, don't trust them, doesn't matter, and this is where I'd be now based on, solid experience as to why I say this, not just some kind of off the cuff, as opposed to how I was raised or a decade ago where I'd always say, absolutely, cooperate, be trustful, speak freely,
The system is
Matthew-
there for your
Yeah,
benefit.
Matthew Russo was the 400-pound individual at 38 Kelsey Street who was tased multiple times by the Hartford Police Department and ended up dying in his home. I had an opportunity to sit down with his mother, and I guess stepfather, could have been his father, I didn't really get into it, And here's what she said to me. I called the police to help my son, and they killed him.
And she lives with that for the rest of her life.
Right. Now, taking what you said, and I go back longer than 10 years, there was a time when I heard that the police were responding to a call, and I said, they're in good hands. Now I sit back and go, oh shit, here it goes.
Yeah.
Or something
but-
happens with my son in Florida, and he calls me up and he says, Dad, there's a policeman at the door. Keep your fucking mouth shut. Tell him he ain't coming in. I'll be calling the lawyer right now. A stepson who's like a son to me in Florida. I get a phone call. Hello? Oh, yeah, who's this? I said, what do you mean, who's this? Who are you? Oh, well, we found this kid walking down the middle of the road with a cell phone and a set of keys in his hand. He's like 4 years old.
Oh.
And I said, oh, Jesus, ask him if his name is Anthony. Are you Anthony? I'm Anthony. A parent's worst nightmare. You put your son down for a nap, and you lay down and figure, I'll sleep too. And that little shit figures out how to open the door, and like Daddy, grabs the keys, grabs the cell phone, and decides to go to the store.
Be thankful he didn't also grab the cigarettes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and goes.
He's
and
going to
goes,
the liquor
and
store.
and is on the way. And is on the way to the store.
Yeah, liquor store.
A parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
And they arrest the parent. The
Right.
charges were eventually dropped. The person I'm talking about is the greatest father in the world. They arrest him. Worst nightmare in the world. Well, guess what? I'm putting fucking deadbolts 6 feet up on the doors. I'm going to have locks on all of the windows. That kid ain't getting out of this house for love nor money. Now I'm a bad parent. But when the cops come to the house, I used to sit there and say, "Whew, they're here." Now I sit there and say, stay the fuck off my land.
Yeah, it's oh shit time.
Stay the fuck off my property. You want to talk? You talk on the other side of the property line. You don't come on my property. Stay off. And is it just me?
No.
No, I mean, I had a discussion with Rachel earlier in the week.
You guys talk. I'm going out to do my
I
thing.
have this this kind of what I'll call almost like a Jekyll and Hyde view of social media, Facebook in particular.
Yeah, it's got its ups and downs.
And I have really since the very beginning. I mean, my first vantage point, through my genealogy, my profession in the genealogy community, and I could see certain areas where it'd be helpful. But at the same time, I also was raising two, girls. I think, back then, I think one was still in middle school, probably one. They might have both been in middle school, high school. In fact, I think they were both under the age where you were supposed to have a Facebook account. I think it was 13 for a long time before you can actually have an account.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, I don't know.
But in any case, so my comment is about Facebook. Earlier this week, somebody that I know, not super well, but my collection of what I'll say my online friends, twice at a conference, or maybe I've viewed one of their lectures online, or they viewed mine or something, and I was quite surprised that this person that I know and have a good impression of, I flicked up Facebook one day, killing a few minutes, and there was just this blanket comment that said something like, and there was a link attached, where some video of a police issue, and she had made the comment something to the effect of, "There are no good cops anymore." And I was really so surprised that this person in particular, I thought, well, come on, that's just such
an overgeneralization.
such an unfair statement,
Yeah.
But and I at that moment realized, when I see something like that, I'm not at a point in my life. I have no desire to engage in confrontation over something. I was disappointed that she would make such a kind of cut and dry statement. But you know, I exercised my own discretion there, and I just decided,
Yeah.
I just unfriend the individual. You know, I don't need to see this. For somebody, I mean, I happen to, you know, have a couple friends who are police officers, one who's a retired police officer, longtime friend. I know a few of the police officers in the town of Trumbull where I lived for 20 years. Wonderful folks. Now, they're wonderful folks who happen to choose a profession where they're labeled, you know, detective or police officer. But for somebody to just say, oh, there's no, you know, none of them are any good anymore, and I thought, oh, what a shame, because that's the, you know, that's like the,
Well, yeah, it's an overgeneralization. And I get those things. They have cop block and they have, you know, different ones. And, you know, I see some of them. There are undoubtedly some bad police practices going on out there. But
Yep.
no doubt about it. And I wouldn't argue about that they were wrong. There are some that are fairly questionable, and I kind of look at them, put myself in this position, say, you know, what would I have done? Sometimes it can go either way. There's a lot of things. People have to realize that every day there are probably, some people estimate as 2 to 4 million contacts with the police and citizens every day. You never hear about those because nothing happens. They all end well,
just on
or
an aggregate
nothing
basis
happens.
across the
Right.
U.S.
But, you know, you get one like this latest one in, where is that, Minneapolis, I think, where the Somali cop shot the woman who was complaining about a burglar or something. And that makes big news, and it gives the impression that these practices, that cops are killing people left and right.
Yeah.
For no reason. They're just killing people, especially black people, for no reason out there. And we know that's not true. But those things get, like everything else, those things get the publicity. There's no
Yeah.
good news, no, very seldom, although I saw one recently, you know, where a cop does something good and somebody actually documents it and, you know, really shows something good. That doesn't make news.
Yeah, proportionally speaking, right? It's the rare, you know, when you see an officer show up and start jump roping with some kids, or, you know, shooting hoops, or a little breakdancing. I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen the videos online, and they, you know, it's
Or resolve things
Yeah.
amicably with people, you know, like in domestic. But there are times when people, a situation, or not de-escalating. Well, you know what? Sometimes the people around are the ones who escalate things out of control. It's not always the cop.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, probably very seldom is the cop, because the cop's there and he knows the paperwork, if nothing else, is going to be a bitch if this doesn't go right.
yeah,
You know, so they want it to end right. And, you know, there are people who will just push and push and push because they want to be YouTube heroes, or they want to school the cops on what the law is and all that, you know, whatever.
Yep.
And so, of course, that's what they put on YouTube,
Right.
is that portion right
Yep.
there.
Looking for views.
So it's, you know, yeah, there is bad police work, and we've said on this show before that we don't support bad law enforcement. We do support good law enforcement.
Yep.
And people have to keep in mind that a lot of these things are put out there for hype and for emotion, that the run-of-the-mill, everyday police interactions with people result in either good turnouts or at least nothing bad happens.
Yep.
Social media has changed the game. Now, I will tell you that J.C. Playford posted onto my Facebook timeline a video clip of a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy in his cruiser
I think I watched it.
making a video to his estranged girlfriend,
Oh, I didn't see this one.
saying to her, you know, he sent her over 100 video clips from his cruiser.
Oh, boy.
And in this video clip,
That's
he's
a lot.
trying to get her to come and meet him. While he's talking to her, a call comes across his radio for shots fired, and everybody's responding, and he's on the camera going, I'm not going to that call. I don't give a shit if anybody dies, and I'm not going, and this is the way it's going to be unless you come to see me. And
Oh, man.
it's on my Facebook page, and now the girlfriend got a restraining order against him, and she posted the videos of what he sent, at least some of them, or one of them.
Oh boy.
And it's outrageous.
Did you fire him?
And you know,
Administrative leave, maybe.
this is
Pending
this
investigation.
This is the issue, Matt. This is the issue. Did they fire him, or was he placed on paid administrative leave pending an investigation?
Yeah.
There's the fucking evidence right there.
Yeah,
Is
how
that
much
you?
an investigation?
Yeah. You're all done. You're all done. Social media, the 24-hour news cycle, the search for stories, the stories that don't make it to mainstream media make it onto YouTube. And then YouTube takes off, and then the mainstream media comes in because YouTube's taking
the
off.
mainstream media starts reporting on what's on YouTube. I mean,
They actually have
Well,
a
they're doing
section.
that now with Twitter.
They have.
Yeah.
They
That's their
actually have a
source now.
section now.
yeah,
Trending videos.
Yeah.
You know, YouTube links, the different YouTube
Yeah.
stuff. Now, so you sit back and you say to yourself, how stupid was the deputy to not realize that that video can, in fact, become public? Did you really think that she's just not going to do anything with that?
Yeah, you're stalking her, and nothing's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, and that's what they actually called him. He was stalking
Yeah.
her.
yeah.
You know,
Oh, my God.
with all
Yeah,
of
I
his
mean,
videos.
one or two, videos, and hey, I'd like to get back together. Okay, 100's probably excessive. You know, unless it was over a 200-year span.
Yeah, them being on the clock and not doing your
so,
job.
So JC,
because of it.
JC calls me, and he says, "You're not going to believe what I just posted up on your Facebook."
How do
you
you
know.
find that, by the way?
JC
Somebody tipped him?
JC has, you know,
He's got a
he
following.
He does have a following, and
Somebody must have tipped him.
you know, I don't know whether he's got certain websites that post this kind of stuff. You know, there's Bad Cop and all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I got to tell you, I believe that people need to be protected in their employment. But God damn it, when something is so blatant, gotta go. I mean, you know what I'm really reading a lot about lately? Teachers having sex with students.
Oh, that's been going
That's
on.
been
No,
in,
no.
that's been in the news a lot in the last.
Let me
couple
tell you
years,
something.
Yeah.
It's been going on.
Female
It's been
teachers,
going
too.
on. It's been going on for hundreds of years. But because of social media, because of the 24-hour news cycle, because it's no longer kept in a dark room and discussed in a back room, even the students now know that they can put it out on social media, and the Board of Ed finds out because the students are talking about it. Well, how did the students know and the principal didn't? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the world is changing. Information is starting to control our destiny. I'll give you an example. That little shit over there in North Korea.
Oh.
Now they're sitting there, you know, I heard,
You're talking about Dennis Rodman's friend?
yeah, Dennis
Okay.
Rodman's
Yeah,
friend.
his friend.
I just
You
want
know.
to make sure I understood
The
what we were
guy, the
talking
guy
about.
with the professional haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy with the professional haircut. Now supposedly he's got an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the center of the United States. Now, why did we go into Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein? What is it about his neighbor, China, that we're afraid of? Well, I got to tell you, Donald Trump, I don't think is going to go a whole lot, much longer. You can't. And, you know, whether you sit down with the Chinese and say, look, party's over. Either you do it,
Right. You deal with it, or we'll deal
you
with it.
do it, or we're going to do
Or
it.
just stay behind the line.
And
take
we'll
care
give
of
you
it.
a heads up. Move all of your people out of the radiation zone. Okay? Move all your people out of the radiation zone. Do whatever you got to do. Now, how do you deal with it? Why are we going to wait for another 9/11? Are we going to wait to get the world behind us because North Korea launches a goddamn missile into the United States?
That's going to be the trigger right there. If he tries to pull that shit, I think things are going to happen real quick.
I just, in the course of my lifetime, I've been friends with a lot of local politicians who sit on town councils. And there's this great idea or a solution to a problem, and the politician will confide in me, you know, I agree, you know, we have to do something, but I don't have the votes to get it through. And I would say to every politician who brought me that situation, I go, look, the public record is the public record. Make the motion. Be very descriptive, but make the motion. If it dies for a lack of a second, or you get the second and it dies because you don't have a majority vote,
You've still memorialized it.
you have memorialized on the record what your position is and that you wanted it to happen and it didn't.
However, there are, sadly, in my opinion, in the state of Connecticut, too many politicians who do not want to memorialize their position
Exactly.
on the record.
Well, it's like
because they want to be kind of.
It's like the Supreme Court doesn't want to deal with the Second Amendment.
Ugh.
No, what I'm saying, and I'm going to this. Obamacare,
Oh, don't even start.
the vote. Trump wanted to repeal and replace. He pushed to have them vote to repeal and replace. Members of his own party deserted him. Or let me put it this way, because you could actually say, my president is from my party, so the Republican Party would not go along in lockstep with their president. But maybe he's not their president. He's obviously not the Democrats' president because they've already started the 2018 election cycle. But I'll give that man credit for one thing. He said that he was going to do it. He went into office. He memorialized his desire to do it. He worked to do it. It didn't work. Okay, Mr. Trump, move on. My president, move on. Because when Obamacare goes down the financial rabbit hole or goes down the rabbit hole because it doesn't work, you can sit back and say, well, I tried. Maybe next time. But I've got other things I got to deal with right now. Let them have their parties, their celebrations that Donald Trump lost on Obamacare. No, he didn't. He did what he said he was going to do. Did he accomplish it? No. Well, you know something? I watch people try to win gold in the Olympics. And maybe they get silver. But I know that man ran the race. I know that man gave it everything he had. It just wasn't his day. It's okay. My president tried to correct the problems with health care in this country. Didn't work.
He's not done yet.
Whatever, didn't work.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the problem. For 8 years, the Republicans have gone up there and wrote bills to repeal Obamacare, knowing that they're hiding behind Obama's veto pen. And they sent them up, and they got vetoed.
And they look good.
And they look good. They say, look what I'm doing. Re-elect me. So now we re-elect them. We've got somebody who will sign their bills. All of a sudden, like, oh, this is too hard. This is crazy. Oh, it's not going to pass. Well, we have to tweak this, and they fall down on the job. I am done with Republicans. They're pieces of shit. The rhinos I'm talking about. They're all pieces of shit. And that's a perfect example, like you were saying, memorializing the issues. Anywhere, whether it's in the town or whether it's in the state legislature, if there's an important issue, we've got to get people in the legislature to demand a roll call vote on those issues. Because all these namby-pamby, linguini-spined idiots, they all want a voice vote so that they don't have to go on the record, pro or con.
Right.
Well, bullshit. Have them put their money where their mouth is. You stand up there, put your face to it with your vote right underneath it, yes or no. No more of this voice voting, anonymous, and going home and having a party and say, re-elect me. You know, I tried this and I tried that. No, results matter. That's the only thing that matters. And if you can't get results, as far as I'm concerned, even if you're a Republican and you're an idiot, I would support a Democrat taking your seat right now to get you the hell out of the door, and then we'll go and try to get a conservative Republican to replace that Democrat the next election if we have to. But no more choice between, you know, two evils. Forget about it. They're both evil. We don't need evil at all. That's my position on it.
Well, the other thing that I think, you know, people's heads would spin, you know, I'm talking specifically at the state level. I think that if most people were to spend some time watching the last couple of days of a legislative session on CTN, and somebody explained to them some of all that, the pomp and circumstances, somebody actually explained to them some of what's going on late in the evening when you see some of these votes that are taking place where they very routinely are just throwing a whole bunch of stuff onto a consent calendar and then quickly voting on the consent calendar. And people should kind of pause right there and go, you know, what were those 20 or 30 things that just got voted on? They don't want there to be a big, extensive, expansive record and discussion as to what just got voted, what just got approved, why. Yeah. It's just, you know, if you throw it onto a consent calendar and vote it through. Now, certainly there's some efficiencies and reasons why things belong on a consent calendar, but I've seen some very smelly deals where things get thrown onto a consent calendar because somebody owed somebody a favor, or, you know, I'll give you two of these, you give me one of those.
Yeah, they slip it in, and every year it happens. Right before October 1st, you'll hear on the news, well, these laws are going into effect, and you look, say, never heard of this.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, where the hell that come from?
Right, and it's going to go live.
It's
going to go live July 1st or October 1st, or
yeah.
Or the section of law they're referring to that's going into effect is the last paragraph in some unrelated area of the law, because that law was amended to include this words that really belongs over in that section.
Yep.
Yeah, they throw the rats in there all the time. And that's why every time you get an amended bill, I mean, everybody knows this, you get an amended bill, you start reading it from the back, because they're going to be putting crap in there or trying to slip something in that's totally unrelated.
Strike all amendment,
what did
and
Rachel,
it completely changes
I think it was Rachel that said to me one time, just read the footnotes.
Yeah, well, that's
just read
where
the footnotes.
A lot of it will appear there.
You know, you see a 1 up here, but just read the footnotes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, one of the most useful things that we have is the ability to go on, and I say Google because I use Google for everything, you know, but to go on to the Connecticut General Statutes and just on a keyword searchable basis, and just when you really start digging through with some more advanced searches and really start flushing out some of the, and then also read through the colored text, right? You know, not just the black and white, but you start reading through the legislative history of some of the changes, and you go, how in the world did we get from here to there?
It's
scary.
It's a nibbling approach that they take, and so that's one thing the liberals are good at, is they'll take their time. They'll take a little this year, a little next year, a little in 2 years, and eventually they get pretty much where they want to go. And it seems like some for a long time, there are people on our side, constitutionalists. I don't know if we're not paying attention or we can't get the politicians to pay attention, but you're right. The way it starts out and the way it ends up sometimes are two very opposite things. And how did this happen? Was everybody asleep? I mean, they can trick you once in a while, but they can't trick you all the time.
Yep.
So it gets frustrating.
Well, let me. I need to say something because I feel part of it. There's a rumor floating out there that the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection is now trying to come up with a new policy and opinion on pre-ban assault rifles.
Yep.
And when you look at some of the information that's out there, it's because of the Kaminsky case and the decision that Rachel got out of the Superior Court.
Right.
In other words, when I had asked the question of the state, the commissioner had an answer. And the appellate court basically said, the commissioner is the ultimate authority. What the commissioner says is the rule.
Now, which commissioner?
Until he says something we don't like.
Until a new commissioner comes in
Yeah.
and reverses what the previous commissioner said.
Exactly.
But the law hasn't changed.
Right.
This commissioner read it this way, this commissioner reads it this way. Okay, gotcha. Now, Rachel and I have found that when we tend to be right in winning an issue, all of a sudden there's a bill proposed to correct if we won, to correct it. Or, I've said to Rachel 100 times, in Connecticut, are so vague and ambiguous, and it's evident by the court decisions that are coming out. Now,
It's a patchwork. It's a big patchwork. Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Rachel was involved in the case, the citable risk warrant case, where the state police had time, and the circumstances permitted it, to obtain a warrant to seize firearms from an individual. But they chose not to get him. Did you get him?
I was just gonna. Oh, you missed it.
That fucking
I was just
fly,
gonna grab him.
that
and you
fucking
went in
fly's
and
been flying around here.
You scared him
You
away
know,
from
that-
me.
you-
All right.
Next time that fly comes, get him.
We'll get him next time.
All right, and we'll do a whole show on killing flies. No. So they had enough time to get a warrant, but instead they went and they seized the firearms, and then a couple of days later they got the warrant. Rachel filed and said, wait a minute. Where I come from, you got to get the warrant first, and then you seize the property or the items. Well, the Connecticut Appellate Court said, nope, it's okay. You can seize firearms before the warrant and then apply for and get the warrant after the seizure. And Rachel applied to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court said no. And that is a citable case. Now, we were in federal court yesterday. We have a client who sued the state. And a lot of the claims were dismissed by the federal court. And when you get all of these dismissals and the dust clears, you have the option of going down to the Second Circuit. And when they were in the magistrate's office yesterday, the state was represented by an assistant AG, and the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection was represented by their head of legal affairs. And they brought up to Rachel that case, saying, well, under this case, we can seize first and get the warrant second.
They didn't follow.
We have the right to see, because in this case, they did the same thing they did in the other case. They seized first and got the warrant next. That's ass backwards.
But I thought you just got finished saying that the Connecticut Supreme Court.
The Connecticut Supreme Court refused Rachel's request to hear. So the appellate court's decision that the Connecticut State Appellate Court said you have the right to seize the items first and get the warrant later. Well, when I went to the police academy, before you seize, you get the warrant if you have time.
And that client didn't pursue certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, which
the first client did not go any further.
Right.
Now we have this client. We've had others.
Yep.
Some clients just don't want to deal with it.
Correct. Well, it's a
Well,
long
we
process.
haven't. Now we have a client.
Proposition.
Now we have a client.
Yeah.
And the case is already in the federal courts, and it involves Brady, and it involves the seizure of the firearms prior to the warrant, the issuance of a warrant.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Rachel was in discussing it, the other side brings up the fact, well, there's an appellate court decision says we can do it. And then Rachel comes out and she's talking to me, and I just put up my hands. I go, wait a minute. That's a goddamn state Supreme Court. That's a state appellate court decision. I want to see how the U.S. Supreme Court is going to rule on taking shit before you get a warrant. I want to see how the Second Circuit's going to answer that question. Can you seize property when you have enough time and there's no exigent circumstances? You have the time and you just choose, well, we're going to go take the shit and we'll get the warrant tomorrow, day after tomorrow, or next week.
And that's not been addressed by the federal.
It's not. I don't think it's been addressed.
Well, not that statute, but I mean, the Supreme Court since the 1930s has ruled on search and seizure cases, and they've consistently said any property seized without a warrant is presumptively illegal. The state has to show, if it's legal, that there's an exception to that rule, and they have, very specific exceptions. So the state is saying, forget the search warrant requirement. Well, how do you do that? Well, that's like, if you went into the judge's chambers and you found some Cuban cigars, you just scoop them up and walk out and tell a judge, I'm taking those illegal Cuban cigars, when those were illegal, and I'm going to turn them over to the state police and they can get a warrant and seize them later. What would the judge say to that one?
Yeah, well, what I'm saying
I
is,
guess you can Mirandize somebody after the confession.
Apparently.
well, what I'm saying is, now here's the case where the client is in full agreement that he's putting in Rachel's hands. Whatever Rachel wants to do, Rachel can do. And I have said to Rachel, I said, Rachel, maybe our appellate court thinks it's okay to seize a person's property without a warrant and get the warrant 2-3 days, a week later. But I don't think that the legal scholars in Washington, D.C. that sit on the Supreme Court are going to agree with the Connecticut Appellate Court's decision. Now, the first client didn't want to go further. We're done. This client is saying, Rachel, do whatever you got to do.
Good. Maybe it'll go somewhere.
And there's still extraordinary odds against even having it heard.
Well, in Connecticut. Yeah, but you take, all right, so because this involves guns. So different rules apply. You let the Hartford police or state police go into Hartford and go bust some minorities. Yeah, minorities for drugs. And say, we're just taking these drugs and stuff. We'll get a warrant later for them. What do you think the court would say then? Oh, totally different. What about now that they have this civil asset forfeiture? You don't even need to be convicted of a crime, not even charged with a crime. You get, and he says, nobody should have that much money. I'm seizing it. They take it and they seize it, bring it into the police station, and there it sits. They don't arrest you. You don't go to court. They don't do anything. They just keep it, and in time, they just use it. They're going to buy radar guns or body cameras, not likely, or whatever. And this is okay. Not even a warrant issue.
Well, they
these.
stopped the practice, and now they're going to reinstitute the practice with some guidelines.
Where?
There's going to on the federal level.
Federal,
at the federal level.
States are still doing this stuff.
You're right. In other words, and I got to tell you, I'm driving down the road in an RV, and I live in an RV, and you never know when the emergency is going to happen. You can carry a pretty large sum of cash.
You can carry any money you want. It's a legal tender.
In a safe in the RV. You carry a large amount of cash.
You just can't cross the border with it.
Huh?
You just can't cross the border, right, with more than 10,000?
No, you have to declare it.
Well,
Right.
that,
You have to declare it when you go across the border.
but it's not illegal.
But I'm just saying that, there's a situation where the state of Connecticut says it's okay to seize guns without a warrant, with no exigent circumstances. You can seize the guns and get a warrant 3 or 4 days later, and what you do is the evidence room at the from.
Is that what's on the warrant?
Yeah, the warrant says I'm going to seize them from the evidence room. No, it's totally ass backwards.
Yeah.
But again, and it shows you the mentality of judicial. They look at guns as guns. Now, we got a couple of minutes left. There's a nightclub in West Hartford that evidently has had some issues. Now, they have what's called these nuisance ordinances or nuisance statutes. That if you have a nightclub and you have a lot of underage drinking or you have marijuana being smoked on the inside and the police department get called there a number of times, it's like an attractive criminal enterprise going on.
It's a hot spot.
That they say, you're closed down. Your liquor license is gone. You didn't keep it under control. You're out of business. And that was in the paper, let's say Tuesday. But then on Wednesday, the article about 90 fucking teenagers being transported to a hospital for being intoxicated at an Xfinity Theater in Hartford concert. Okay? 90.
90, I saw
Not
that.
9, 90. And now the Xfinity is talking to the Hartford Police Department about hiring more police officers, I guess to patrol, to try and prevent. That's not going to prevent it.
They had 70 officers at the event.
Well, now they're going to have, 140? Yeah. They only have so many Hartford policemen. Yeah. But what I'm saying is this. When does the big venue cross the line that the little venue crossed? In other words, are there people at the concert smoking weed? I'm willing to bet there are. Are there tailgate parties at a UConn game where people get drunk? Now, if you're going to close down, or the smaller guy, the law has to be applied to the big guy. But what would happen if the Xfinity venue in Hartford got shut down? Got shut down. Mayor Began Bronin would be crying because, people come into the city and they eat at restaurants. And, what about the people who get drunk at the Civic Center and then spill out onto the streets and go into the bar and get more drunk? Close it down.
Jump off
Close
the roof.
it down.
Yeah, but
done.
See, to the liberals, something like the Xfinity is just too big to fail.
Too big to flay. Too big to close.
Yeah.
Too big to close.
But the little guy
All right,
gets
listen,
shoved.
it's 5:58. I know that Sky has to get the closing up. And I'm going to go in and make sure everything's okay.
Unless you want me to do that.
Why don't you go do it?
Of course, I'm sure it's okay.
Oh, now she's got to go to the right camera. Look at this.
Oh, here it comes.
Make sure the volume's
Thanks for
down.
watching, folks.
Make sure the volume's down in there, Dan. Go in and make sure the volume's down. And make sure you stop capturing. Sky.